Coming up, we continue the DTVC Extra series look at the Bloodfist films. We'll be looking at movies 5 and 6. And then next week, Ty from Comeuppance is back on. We will be looking at Detective Night Independence, which is the third and final film in that Detective Night series, the Bruce Willis films. So we'll be looking at that movie. And then we will also be looking at Hellblazers, a Bruce Dern film that was, I think it was the director, Justin Lee, who did Hunting Games and Most Dangerous Game, the two CT movies we saw that also had Bruce Dern in them. So we'll be looking at that next week. And then the week after, we're going to finish off this DTVC Extra look at the Bloodfist series. We'll be looking at 7, 8, and then 2050, which I have never seen 2050 before. So this should be interesting. I did look at the IMDb page for it, and it looks like Ty and Brett from Comeuppance have done this film. Simon and Explosive Action, and then Mitch in the Video Vacuum have done it. So it's not like everybody's been avoiding it. It doesn't have a lot of reviews, but it's one that I haven't seen. I've been meaning to watch it for a while, so we'll see what happens there. Get some Serio H. Santiago, because I'll probably review it for the site as well, because I haven't reviewed it for the site either. So that ought to be interesting. That'll be in 2 weeks. We'll be finishing up the DTVC Extra series, and then we're planning to record again with Ty and then with Brett as well from Comeuppance. Looking to do an episode on Napier, on Charles Napier, calling it Napes of Wrath. But I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like. Probably do like a top 5 like we usually do, but also do some other stuff with him just because he's a little bit more interesting, right? He's not always the star of his movies, but he's definitely sort of an indelible part of the DTV landscape. So we've been talking about wanting to do this episode about him for a while. So we're going to probably hopefully record that this weekend, and then that'll come up in 3 weeks, I guess, right? Because it'll be next week is Ty, the week after finishing Bloodfist, and then the week after that, Ty and Brett. And so that'll happen there. And then I'm looking to record some more this month with episodes that'll probably be coming out in the new year. So we'll kind of start that recording process as well. So you got some stuff in the hopper for sure. But I did want to quickly say too that the streams have been going up for the podcast. So definitely really appreciate the support. Really appreciate people checking things out, curious, about what we've been talking about, enjoying things. Always appreciate feedback as well. So, you're welcome to hit me up. I think, Facebook is one way. There's a lot of engagement on Facebook, so you're welcome to check me out there. Message anything, there's things you want us to talk about, aren't talking about, those kinds of things, always appreciate that. But overall, just appreciate the support. One of the things you'll notice when you go into the back catalog, because some people have gone way back deep into the back catalog there. We end, I think, on episode 12. So I don't think there's anything before episode 12 in the back catalog. That's not because I'm like vaulting them for Patreon or any reason like that. It's that when I originally was putting the episodes on TalkShoe, there was a server crash and we lost everything from, I think, before January 1st, 2015. So all of those earlier episodes were removed, but I did have them on my computer. So I'm in the process of trying to put them back up. One of the issues is that when we record those, we used a service called Mixler, and we just recorded them live, and then later on I posted them on TalkShoe. And one of the things I was discovering with those early episodes is that Jamie, who's my co-host at the time, her audio was louder than mine. And so, and it was like so much so that like, if you were listening to the episode, you'd have to like turn my audio up, and then when you did, Jamie's would come through really loud. And so I've been kind of trying to even out the audio for those. That's one thing I've been trying to do. The other thing is there was 2 episodes in August of 2014. That was the year, the month that I got married. And so I was out. I wasn't doing podcast episodes because of that. John Cross from After Movie Diner, he did those episodes with Jamie, and he sent them over to me to put on TalkShoe. And I think he used a Dropbox link, which of course that Dropbox link is no good. And I can't find the episodes. I think they're on my old computer, which the screen is bad on that. So I got to figure out a way to hook that thing up to like a TV or something so I can get those files out of there and have those. But I may just skip those 2 because that's where I'm at now. I think it's 10 and 11 were the 2 that John did. So that's where I would be at for the back episodes, and then kind of everything else before that is there. So so I might start getting those up. But yeah, there isn't like a Patreon. We don't have a Patreon for the account. The main reason for that, well, there's 2 main reasons why I don't have a Patreon, and who knows, maybe at some point I'll revisit that. But one is just I don't know that I can deliver consistent enough quality that it would constitute somebody paying monthly for something. So that's really the biggest thing, is that if I'm asking somebody to pay whatever it is, $5 a month, I've got to sort of deliver something on that. Now, granted, if enough people paid $5 a month, maybe, I have the resources to deliver something there, but I just don't know. I mean, I'm already, go through these phases where I have trouble booking guests. And so I definitely would not want to be charging somebody $5 a month or asking for $5 a month donations when I'm doing solo podcasts like this episode. I just don't think that's worth that kind of thing. So that's the first reason why I haven't done it yet, is I just don't think I'm at that quality yet. The other thing too is that the books are kind of the way that people can financially support us. So, from a financial standpoint, if you think about it, right, like for example, my newest book, Don's House in the Mountains. If you get that on Kindle for $5, it's just $5, right? And you get a copy of the book, right? You get the book on your Kindle device and you can read it. So it's a lot cheaper, right, than obviously if you do $5 a month on Patreon. That's like what, $60, that you're paying a year, right? Because it'll just keep hitting your account for that. Whereas I'm just saying like one time, $5, just buy the book. And each, I guess I put out a new book each year, right? So I guess it's like $5 a year. But you also get a book in the process. So I guess that's the other way too. That like, for people to financially support the podcast, if that's something that you're interested in, that's the main way to do it. And I mean, one thing I was thinking about, because I do, I listen to podcasts that do have Patreon accounts where a lot of times they'll kind of give shout outs to the patrons or the new patrons or whatever. One that I listen to, it's called Knowledge Fight, where it's these two guys who make fun of Alex Jones. They do like a thing where they call people, policy wonks and technocrats, and depending on what tier, right, you support them at, they give you a shout out at the beginning of the episode. And what people do is they use that opportunity to create these fake names. So sometimes like they're fake names that are like, congratulations on us, on your wedding, Jim and Susie, right? And sometimes the guy won't be able to read them off for like months after. And it's like, oh yeah, you got married 3 months ago or something like that. That's kind of the joke as well. But that's one of the things that they do. So, I mean, that's something too. Because that's the other thing too, right? Is people, when they buy the books, I mean, right now, my newest one, Don's House in the Mountains, the only sale that I can attribute to someone is John Krotz from After Movie Diner let me know that he bought a copy, even so showed me the picture when it came in the mail. So I know he's bought one, right? But other people have bought it, and I thank everybody who has bought it. I really appreciate you supporting my work like that. But I don't know, I wouldn't know who it is. I wouldn't know if it's my mother or if it's a listener or anything like that, or blog supporter. So you can always shoot me a line and say, hey, I bought a copy. And I can always give you a shout out on the episode or something like that as well. But that's all that's to say. That's kind of the two main reasons why I don't have the Patreon account, or I haven't gone into Patreon yet, is that one, I just don't know that I can consistently produce episodes that have guests. I'm just doing this out of my home office. I'm looking to probably get some soundproofing, and I need to get a better mic and all that kind of stuff. But it is still kind of a little bit, fly by the seat of the pants. I mean, this episode that Ty and I did recently was a really fun episode. But we do a lot. I tend to let the guests, we kind of go off on tangents, and we kind of go off, or like when John's on, when he was on the last time when we did the DTVC Extra on episode on movies 3 and 4, right? We just kind of went off on these huge tangents, and I don't know if I've got to, if I'm starting to charge people, if I've got to maybe kind of, adhere to a stricter timeline or something like that. So those kinds of things as well. So that's one part of it, right? Is that just from an overall quality standpoint, I don't know that I can get a guest consistently to be on, and I don't know if I should be charging or asking for $5 donations if I'm just doing a solo podcast like this one. So that's the first thing, and then the other thing again is my books are there for people if they want to financially support us, and of course I appreciate that anytime. And again, you get something out of the deal as well. You get one of my books, and based on the scant reviews that I've gotten or the feedback I've gotten, people enjoy them. So so it's not like you're getting a horribly quality book, but that's the other way to think of it. But yeah, I mean, thinking about that kind of thing, I know, whether it's Patreon or, however people try to sort of monetize their sites. I know when I first got into the DTV Connoisseur, I had Google Ads up, right? I had the AdSense things up, and I was looking to make money with it. And my friends and I, we were clicking on the ads, and Google was like, "Oh, you can't be clicking on the ads like that," and they just revoked the account. I did end up selling an ad. A woman got me an ad. I sold an ad, or a woman bought an ad for like $60. She was like a broker or something, and so she was like, it was like something with Comcast or something, so it was like a $60 ad. So that was kind of the only real ad that I've ever sold on the site. There was that one, and that was, I don't remember. And then of course it was like after she didn't want to renew it because I wasn't getting enough traction. I am getting more traffic to the site now, but that's always one thing, right? It's like, okay, do you monetize your site by getting ads and having people advertise on there? People click on the ads. That's one one way for monetizing. And then, of course, there are those other avenues like Patreon, having things behind a paywall, those kinds of things. So I think ultimately what any of us who are doing this kind of thing, we do it for fun, we do it as a hobby, but, if you can make money doing it, that's a huge piece, right? Because I think we're all sort of in this sort of burnout phase where we're just kind of tired of the grind of working, and having a 9-to-5 job. And granted, that is a sort of a privileged thing, right? That like I'm not an 11-year-old working in a nickel mine somewhere, right? That like I've got the luxury of being a 44-year-old in Philadelphia to say like, oh, I wish I didn't have to work, my cushy like computer job that I do, right? There's that part of it, but there's also the part where it's like it just is, kind of the idea of having something like this be your job just always seems like a lot of fun. And I don't think anybody needs to be making $150 million a year like Joe Rogan, but I think there's that part of it. I think that's the impetus why people put things behind Patreon walls, or why people sort of try to monetize things, however it is, whether it's ads or whatever. In my case, it's a combination. It's more like I've written these novels and I'm putting them on Amazon, and I want to try to be able to sell them, and I kind of one of the things I've been sort of trying to make a more concerted effort to advertise about the books and get the word out about the books more, so more people could possibly buy them and check them out. But it's one of those things where you write a book, you write a novel, you want to get it out there. So that's kind of a separate piece, but that's it's not necessarily a way I'm trying to monetize my site, I guess is what I should say, but it is a way that people can financially support the site if that's something they were looking for. So just sort of putting that out there. But yeah, I kind of got on that tangent, I guess, again, just talking about those episodes that we don't have of the podcast that that have disappeared. They haven't been vaulted or anything like that. I've just got to try to find them and get them on the site somehow. All right, so that is the podcast. With the blog, we've got the next few reviews lined up. So originally I was going to be doing The Get Back this weekend, and then Astro with the Gary Daniels film, and then finishing the year, with the Christmas Post doing Randall Scandal. What happened was that my the Comcast or Xfinity offered that deal again, where they give you $1 rental for the weekend, and they bumped the price back up to $5.99, or I guess it was always $5.99. It was just a matter of whether those new releases were $5.99 or $7.99. And Outlaw Johnny Black, the new Michael Jai White film, that was available as a $5.99 rent, and I was like, oh, why don't I just grab that, for $1 and check it out. So I don't want to walk over the review, but I'm going to write the review for that one this weekend. So I'm going to kind of push everything back, except that Randall Scandal is going to still sit on that Christmas one, just because I've been doing documentaries for Christmas, probably since I came back. I think the only one I didn't do was last year. I think I did Pups Alone instead. But for the most part, for whatever reason, I've just started doing documentaries for Christmas posts, and I'm going to keep Randall Scandal there. So I think what's going to happen is I'll do Outlaw Johnny Black this weekend, next weekend The Get Back, and then Randall Scandal. Then the weekend after that, maybe start the year with Astro. We'll see. One of the interesting quirks about this review, though, doing this review for Outlaw Johnny Black now, is that Fred Williamson has a cameo at the end of the film, which is going to make that his 30th film on the site, put him in the 30 club. Usually I like to do a kind of a special post for that, right? If we're getting somebody into the 30 club, you want to do something that they're a big star in. So I was kind of faced with that dilemma of like, do I wait on Outlaw Johnny Black until I get Fred Williamson's 30th post in? But then it's like, why do I want to, what's the, that's the only reason why I would be waiting. So I can still do essentially what would be a more 30 club post for Fred Williamson to sort of honor that move that he's getting in there without waiting. It's just going to be that, it'll just be his 31st movie instead of his 30th one. So just an interesting quirk about doing this review. But yeah, I think for people, for Outlaw Johnny Black, just to kind of a little bit of spoiler alert, I enjoyed it. It's a little over 2 hours, like 2 hours and 10 minutes, but I think Michael Jai White really delivers something here with that film. It's, I don't know, comparing it to Black Dynamite, I don't know, I guess the way I would say it is if you take Black Dynamite, and again, granted, that was like almost 14 years ago that he put that one out, or maybe it was 14 years ago. If you were looking for a second film from Michael Jai White to build off of Black Dynamite, this is the movie. Outlaw Johnny Black is definitely the movie where he kind of stretches a little bit more. He kind of does. It's a bigger movie, and he does more with it. But yeah, it definitely is that good second movie. If he wasn't going to make a Black Dynamite 2, this is definitely one to watch. So yeah, if you get a chance to see it, I think you definitely should. I think it's worth checking out. And again, I'm huge on runtime, right? You know me with my 90-minute runtimes, and this one is a little bit over 2 hours. I think for every once in a while, I think you can forgive it, right? And it's this one's definitely one of those ones that I would go, okay, it's worth the 2 hour and 10-minute runtime. I think it's there's some points where maybe it slows down a little bit, but overall it kind of it hits the marks that you want it to. And Michael J. White just does another really fantastic job there. So so that'll be what we'll be doing on we'll be reviewing this weekend is Outlaw Johnny Black. So kind of getting that release out of the way there. I think that's kind of everything. Of course, going back to the books, Don's House in the Mountains is available now, paperback on Kindle, $4.99 on Kindle, or $12.99 in paperback. I will have the link to my author website in the in the description here, so you can go to the author website and you can go get any of my books that are there, because all of them have new covers. They're all available now. So you can go check those out. But again, any support on the writing, I always appreciate. So I think that is everything there. So what we'll do here is we'll have our theme song here from John Cross and Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures, and then we will start by looking at Bloodfist V, Human Target. All right, we are back. And before we get into Bloodfist V, I want to kind of go back to Bloodfist IV a little bit and sort of set the stage for what we have going on here. So Bloodfist III, right, when Bloodfist III comes out, that one's released in the theater. It's the first one that doesn't have Don the Dragon Wilson as Jake Ray, right? It's the first one that just has him as a random person. There was a prison film that Corman and New Conquered Horizon were making. They decided, you know what, we're going to have Don the Dragon Wilson, and why don't we slap the Bloodfist name on it, call it good. It was given a limited theatrical release, nothing crazy. I think everyone after that becomes either direct-to-video, or I think Bloodfist 2050 was a TV movie. So when we get into Bloodfist 4, it is a direct-to-video movie. When you go on the IMDb site, it says video in parentheses next to the name. It starts a certain trend where we get Don the Dragon Wilson as this one guy against the world kind of thing. Part 6, which we're going to talk about in the next segment, goes away from that a little bit, but for the most part, that's the idea, right? Is that Don the Dragon Wilson is this guy who, whatever it is, whether he is a guy with amnesia, he's a guy who's like a repo guy who's down on his luck, whatever the deal is, it's him against the world. He's got the cops against him. He's got the baddies against him. The only person he can trust is usually a woman who's helping him out. So in Bloodfist 4, it's Amanda Weiss. We get into Bloodfist V, that's Denise Duff. Jillian McWhorter plays that part some. So we get a lot of those kinds of things. So Bloodfist 4 really sets up the stage for what a lot of these Bloodfists are going to be like, and they just sort of rotate in different story elements, but it's sort of this basic idea. The other thing is that Michael McDonald, not the not the singer Michael McDonald, right? Not the I can't forget we're not in love anymore, right? Not that Michael McDonald, but I guess he was going by Michael James McDonald. But Michael McDonald from Mad TV, he plays like little parts in these movies. So Bloodfist 4, he's a newscaster. Bloodfist V, which we're going to be talking about in a second here, he's a jewelry store clerk. And Bloodfist VI, he's like one of the Navy guys. So interesting thing too that we've got to have Michael McDonald as like some sort of like small bit part in each of these before he gets the Fox News or sorry, not Fox. I keep saying Fox News. He gets the Mad TV on Fox gig. And of course Art Camacho, right? He comes in starting with number 4 as a fight coordinator, and he gets small bit parts in each of these as well. When we get to number 6, he has kind of a bigger part. So just sort of setting the stage for what these movies end up being here. Bloodfist 4, going back to the previous episode I did with John Cross, just sort of setting that stage for what we get coming up here. So why don't we get stuck in on Bloodfist 5? Bloodfist V starts with our hero, Don the Dragon Wilson, running away from a couple of DTV film mainstays. We've got Yuji Okamoto, and we've got, I think it's Roger Yuan, right? There's Roger and Ron Yuan. I don't know which one we have. I thought we had Roger in this one. Probably should have had that down already before we got there, but I didn't. I didn't, have it right away. So actually, maybe it wasn't one of the. It wasn't. Oh, it was Ron Yuan. Ron Yuan. Yeah. So not Roger. Ron Yuan. Yeah. So those two are chasing him, and he gets shot, falls in the water, wakes up in the hospital, doesn't remember who he is. Right. So he's got amnesia. Denise Duff pretends to be his wife, goes to break him out, and then we see Okamoto and Yuan again, and our hero has to fight them off, still doesn't remember who he is. Duff takes him to her pimp, who's played by Steve James. So that's Steve James, right? The from the American Ninja films, really fantastic action actor. He's her pimp named Marcus. They show up, Okamoto and Yuan, they shoot and kill James. Duff and Wilson run off, and now they've got to sort of piece things together. Wilson thinks that perhaps he is either he might have, he finds out that maybe he was an NSA agent, and that's where we get not Kurtwood Smith, but the other dad from that '70s show. He's there as the Don Stark. For some reason I drew a blank on his name. Don Stark. He's telling Don the Dragon Wilson, "Oh, I used to work with you. You're glad you didn't turn on us." Then there's a Chinese crime lord who's also like trying to get after him. Eventually, he dispatches Joe San and some other baddies to try to take Wilson down. Wilson sort of it slowly starts to piece it together, and it's one of those things of like nobody is who they seem, right? We get some MacGuffin MacGuffin elements where there's money involved. There's also plutonium, because that's really what's happening here. Is that whether he was an NSA agent or he was a baddie, Don the Dragon Wilson was supposed to be brokering this plutonium sale, and he was either brokering it to some, to this Asian crime syndicate who was going to maybe sell it to the Chinese, or who knows what was going to happen there. And so one of the things Wilson realizes is that whoever he is or he's supposed to be, he knows the biggest thing is he doesn't want this plutonium to get into the wrong hands, which is very noble of him to want that. And so it's just essentially, going from scene to scene of people like trying to take him out, him fighting them off, not sure who he can trust. Maybe he can trust this people, maybe he can trust these people. Can he even trust Denise Duff, right? We don't know. And that's essentially it. For this movie here, I think this one it's a lot of fun, right? It's a fun 90s actioner. That's, kind of what you're working with here. I think I was trying to think like where in the saga this would be that you'd have the amnesia movie. I was trying to think like, for example, with the Lethal Ladies movies, right? That like they did the one, was it Hard Hunted, right? I can't remember what number. I probably should have written it down before I did the podcast here, but Hard Hunted, right? That's the one where she has amnesia, Donna Spear. And so there's, you got to have the amnesia movie in the series at some point. So I was trying to remember where in the series that one was. It's sort of like in the I don't know, the film connections here, like where it was in that, like how many into the movies it was. And the other thing too, there's another way to kind of think of it. So it was actually the 6th movie in the series, I think, was I'm sorry. Yeah. It was the 7th movie in the series when Donna's if you count Malibu Express as one of the movies. If you don't count Malibu Express, right, then it was the 6th movie in the series that Donna Spear gets amnesia, right? Remember, there's a guy that like tricks her into thinking they were lovers and they have sex, and then she's like, I faked my orgasm or something, and she killed him. So that was the one with the jade, and all that stuff going on there. So anyway. One of the things when I was looking at the trailer for Bloodfist V is that they were saying it was the premier action series of all time, right? That they were essentially calling it like kind of the number one. And of course, this was in the mid '90s, so this would have been before. I mean, you could maybe make a case that maybe Rambo would have been that big, but for 5 movies at the time, that probably would have been a fair claim, right? Now you look at it and you go like, okay, well maybe like Fast and the Furious, maybe. Mission Impossible, some of these Marvel things might have been bigger action franchises, right, than Blood Fist. But at that time, right, they were touting it as the best action series, ever or whatever. I do think that the Sedaris Lethal Ladies films would have given it a run for its money at that time. And again, one of the things you think about is that this is only the fifth Blood Fist movie, and we're in 1994. 1994, right? That's when Dallas Connection comes out. For the Sedaris film. So you're talking about, again, whether you count Malibu Express or not as one of the films. But if we count Malibu Express, that's, 9 movies in is Dallas Connection. We're only 5 into Bloodfist V, and they're already making that claim that it's the greatest action series of all time. I guess, the amount of toplessness that's in the Sedaris films, they decide they can't count it too much as an action series. But, yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation to have because one of the things, of course, that makes the Blood Fist series, I think, better than the Sedaris films is the level of martial arts that you get. And Blood Fist V, it definitely picks up where number 4 leaves off, where you get the Art Camacho level of fight coordination that, that Don the Dragon Wilson's bringing it. You get some really great guys that he fights against. Joe San, he has some good fight scenes with Joe San. He has some good fight scenes with Ron Yuan. And, of course, with Steve James. He has a really great fight scene with him as well. So, all of that stuff, I think, really, if you're going to try to compare the two between this one and, because I think at that time, I think those two are the biggest ones, right? I think the Lethal Lady series and the Blood Fists are kind of competing on that score. And again, I would imagine the Blood Fists would say, oh, we don't have anything to do with those movies, right? That they're sort of, the Sedaris films, right? There's sort of more of a Skinamax element to them that the Blood Fist films don't have. But I think for me, I would definitely put the Lethal Lady series up there as a great action franchise. But yeah, you can make the case that the Blood Fist one, especially in the mid-90s, was growing into that best action series ever. I think people listening to this might say that, like, yeah, you could still make the case for it being, I don't know if I would still make the case for it being better than, like, the Fast and Furious films. But, there's a ridiculousness that the Fast and the Furious films get into that these movies don't. These movies have a different kind of ridiculousness, right? But you never see, if we got to a point where we had Don the Dragon Wilson in space, I think we could really make that case that, and who knows, maybe we get there. Maybe that happens. So speaking of Don the Dragon Wilson, so he comes back from number 4, right? He comes in at number 5. First off, he has like the long hair, which luckily they don't make us sit with for too long. But it is kind of funny to see him with the long hair and the double-breasted suits. That all of that stuff is just ridiculous. One thing I like is they didn't really get into why he's a great martial artist, and he just is, which is perfectly fine with me. I think. For him as the lead, again, he's really starting to pick up where you're really starting to build on that action lead quality. At 94, right? You think about how many movies in we are with him at this point. At this stage, he's doing the Blood Fist movies, but he's also started the Ring of Fire movies, and so he's got that. He's got and I guess actually Cyber Tracker he does in 94, so he's even going to be starting another one, which I don't think he really knows that's going to be a series at this point yet, right? Cyber Tracker 2 is just, I guess it came out a year after, so maybe they did know they were going to do Cyber Tracker 1 and 2. But anyway, he's putting out a ton of stuff at this point, which is fantastic. But yeah, he's really kind of coming into his own as that great DTV action lead. Never quite gets it there on the next level. Like in terms of big screen films, he's got like a bit part in Batman Forever, 1995. But really, he's not getting anything along those lines. Like those roles aren't coming to him. I don't know why. Maybe he would know better why that was happening. But yeah, he wasn't really getting those kinds of roles, but he was doing so much of this other stuff that maybe too there wasn't time. Maybe he was locked into these contracts or something, and he couldn't do anything on the big screen. But yeah, by the time we hit 1994, just thinking about where we've come, and actually I'm saying 1994. because he actually has both films come out, 5 and 6 come out in 1994. He also has Red Sun Rising, he has Cybertrucker, he has Lion Strike, the third Ring of Fire movie comes out in 94. So, I mean, he is working, he is pumping stuff out, but it's not the kind of pumping stuff out that you see like with Seagal, right? Where Seagal's just like, I need another movie, I need another couple $1 million, get me another movie, and he just sort of sits most of the time, and someone like Byron Mann is doing all the heavy lifting. I mean, other than part 6, which we're going to be talking about in a second here, I mean, he's in a lot of the scenes. He's doing a lot of the work in these movies. It's a lot of Don the Dragon Wilson. And, I mean, he's just getting after it. And, I think this period that we're talking about with the Bloodfist film, where we start with the first one in 89, in 5 years, he's really established himself as just a solid action lead that, kids my age going to the video store would be looking for. It is kind of amazing how quickly that happens for him. I mean, 5 years, it's just, just snap of the finger, and he's already there. And Bloodfist V really does that, for sure. I think Bloodfist V really kind of, he kind of keeps building on that piece there that's there. I don't like this one as much as 4. I think 4 is a better movie. I think we're starting to get a little bit more, I don't want to say, we're getting a little bit, starting to maybe get into that diminishing returns with these, where they're just starting to pump them out so much. And I think when we talk about number 6, I think we can probably get into that a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, this movie does the trick on that level. And so this is a lot of fun there. Some of the other quirks I wanted to mention about the film, is Sharon Lawrence plays a jewelry store clerk. So if you remember her from NYPD Blue, she's just, and Michael McDonald, right? Not the I keep forgetting we're not in love anymore. Michael McDonald, but the Mad TV Michael McDonald. He comes in and sort of because essentially what happens is, in trying to figure out who he is, Don the Dragon Wilson, Denise Duff notices that he's got like a Tiffany ring on, or it's a really nice ring. They go to the jewelry store where it was, and they finds out that they have an account for him there. So that's how he's able to find out his address is through that. And it ends up working out that way. But yeah, I was trying to see if Sharon Lawrence, like when NYPD Blue started, and because that's where she would have been on, 93. So I'm wondering if this was shot in 93 and came out in 94, because I don't know if somebody who was in NYPD Blue would be doing a like small jewelry store clerk role in a direct-to-video action movie at that time. So she must have not known, right? She was making this, maybe they were shooting it in 93, and she, at the same time, gets this callback on NYPD Blue, and it's like, oh, I'm going to start making this movie. It's kind of like Carrie-Anne Moss with Sabotage, right? Where she does Sabotage, and then soon after she gets the Matrix film. So eventually you kind of get those bigger roles there. But it's just an interesting quirk. Sometimes you see that with these direct-to-video movies, where you get somebody who, it's right around the time of breaking out and being a bigger name, is kind of what happens there. Same thing with Don Stark, right? Who Don Stark plays an NSA agent who he was a buddy of Don the Dragon Wilson's, and he thinks that Don has gone rogue on him, when in fact that he just has amnesia. And so he tries to help him out, and it doesn't go so well for Stark, but that's the role that he plays. And I was trying to think, that 70s show, like, again, I think it would have been a little bit later than that, right? That 70s show is kind of more into later into the 90s, I think. And so I remember it was that 70s show. Oh, yes, that 70s show was 98, right? So I remember that 70s show caught on, and they tried to do that 80s show, and it lasted for like, I don't know, like a half a season before it bombed out. But I remember Don Stark, obviously, between him and Kurtwood Smith, right, as the dads on that 70s show. It was always part of the fun there. So anyway, so Don Stark is in this. So again, another person who, a few years later, he was going to get onto a full-time, full-on TV show. Essentially, he wouldn't have been, again, probably the same way as Sharon Lawrence, he wouldn't have been like the top name on the TV show, but he was going to get regular work pretty soon coming up here. But he had to do this last direct-to-video kind of thing here. And I guess for him, he was doing direct-to-video stuff a little bit longer. Kind of, if you go into his his IMDb bio, right? He does some LA Heat episode. He does an LA Heat episode, Time Cop, the TV series episode. Actually, he did 9 of those episodes. I think he was a bigger part now that I remember it. But yeah, some movies like American Dragons. So this is one of many that he was doing here in '94. Yeah. Now, one of the things I wanted to also get into was I want to get into Steve James's part in this because. So he kind of comes back with like a secondary role in the film. We find out, again, as everybody, they're not who we think they are. So we find out later that he's somebody else. And one of the things I was thinking about with Steve James is he's kind of in his fight scene with Don the Dragon Wilson, is that Steve James could have been the person that they were centering Bloodfist around, right? He had the kind of presence and the kind of martial arts ability that you could have had him be, kind of the lead in a series of movies that are, Bloodfist movies. I guess the one difference between Steve James and Don the Dragon Wilson is that James has a little bit more of an imposing presence. And so he doesn't quite come off as the underdog as much, right? Like nobody's underestimating Steve James, right? They're like kind of probably like the moment he walks into a room, they're probably walking away or running away or whatever. But it does kind of get back to that point that like when you see Steve James in these movies, whether it's this movie or the American Ninja films, where it's kind of the same thing, where it's like he could have been the lead in the American Ninja movies, right? He had the martial arts ability. He had it much better than Dudikoff. At least here with Don the Dragon Wilson, they're comparable, right? Don the Dragon Wilson was a champion kickboxer, so he had the skills at least. Whereas Dudikoff, they just the Golden Globus liked his look and it picked him ahead of Steve James. Here it's a little bit different, where he at the very least, you could say that Don Dragon Wilson's got the chops to be the lead here. But it is kind of this shame in watching this. You realize like what kind of a career Steve James should have had and didn't have, and this is one of those things. I mean, imagine him as the Bloodfist, the lead in all these Bloodfist movies, right? Or if they had a similar Bloodfist series with him as the lead, it would have been fantastic. Kind of going back to Michael Jai White, who we were talking about, the opening segment, and whose film I'm going to be reviewing on this weekend. It would be interesting if they ever remade Bloodfist or made something similar to Bloodfist, right? And they just had Michael Jai White in the lead. All of these storylines that Don the Dragon Wilson's in, for the most part, you could just put them in modern DTV, films and had Michael Jai White just get after it. This movie here, right, where Don the Dragon Wilson has amnesia and he doesn't know what kind of, if he's an agent or not. You could do that with Michael Jai White, and it would have been a whole, really fantastic movie. And you could do it today in 2023 with Michael Jai White. And it would be a fantastic movie, and that might be something. I mean, he's doing a lot of different parts, but I wonder too if he kind of gets into that mold of like Fred the Hammer Williamson, where it's like I'm not getting the parts I want, so I'm going to just start making my own movies. I'm going to direct my own movies. I'm going to get my own franchises. I mean, honestly, I mean, I don't know, what kind of copyright there would be for a story like this, right? I mean, you could rip off this story almost, not word for word, but this whole concept of the story, you could essentially take this and remake it. And you could do it for all of these movies and just, because they're all just basic paradigms, right? And do like a series of 8 really fantastic action movies with Michael Jai White that are kind of in the tradition of what we're seeing here with Don the Dragon Wilson. And I think they would be really exciting and really fun. And I think that's kind of the ultimate thing I'm left with here when I'm watching Bloodfist V, is that this movie, I liked 4 better than this one, but I had a lot of fun with this. And one of the things we're seeing, I think, when I go back into these 90s movies here, is that, nowadays with direct-to-video action not being so great, right? We watch a movie, and if it's good enough, right? If it's in this category of I had a fun time with that, or at least I wasn't bored, or whatever it is, that's almost like this level of this is fantastic, right? Whereas in the mid 90s where Bloodfist V Human Target comes out, we're still kind of in this huge PM bubble where there's just tons of stuff coming out there, right? I mean, canon is pretty much done at this point by 94, right? They're kind of out, so early 90s they were kind of petering out. By 94, I think, that's kind of it for them. But PM was really getting after it, and of course, Conquer New Horizons had these Bloodfist movies. You also had the some of the films that Cynthia Rothrock was doing around that time. So there's a lot of really great stuff coming out. So a Bloodfist V Human Target is not going to stand out as like one of the best of the era, but by the same token, it's 85 minutes of fun that I just find myself enjoying myself watching it. And that's more than you can say for a lot of the movies that come out nowadays. I know, when Ty and I are doing these new movies that we've been doing, we kind of pick two films on Tubi. We have a lot of trouble getting two Bloodfist V Human Targets, right? You're lucky if you get one Bloodfist V Human Target, let alone two. I don't think we've had two yet during this entire, the run that we've been doing this. That we've been able to look at two movies and say, yeah, they were both really good, or they're both fun enough, right? And I think that's an interesting thing. Is like, and how do you get back to that, right? How do you go to these studios that are kind of just sort of grinding out as much as they can, that don't have big budgets, that don't have a lot that they can do, and say like, hey, can you just do Bloodfist V Human Target? Like, is that possible? Can you just give us that? Because really, right, if we got a Bloodfist V Human Target now, we'd probably put it up as like best movie of the year, for our direct-to-video action fandom that we have. And that was something that really struck me. There's just definitely some keys to these movies that, again, these themes that I'm coming back to on why these movies work and modern movies just don't seem to be working. Again, runtime, getting back on runtime. It's not just even that it's this is an 83-minute movie. It's not just that part of it, but that there seems to be something happening roughly every 10 to 15 minutes, right? That the moment we kind of get a chance to relax a little bit, Don's there with maybe having a heartwarming moment with Denise Duff, and maybe we, the will they or won't they kind of thing. Suddenly Joe San shows up with an Uzi and starts firing up the place and just destroying everything, or Yuji Akamoto comes in and crashes his car to something, and it's like a fight. It's like we're not left with a lot of dead space. But the other thing too is that the action scenes are allowed to breathe. Yes, we might get a cutaway where we get like a kind of a straight on shot of Don the Dragon Wilson doing a jumping roundhouse kick, and then we cut to the guy whose face is getting nailed and falling back. We might get some of that. But generally, it's like a few moves, and we can kind of breathe as we're watching it, right? It's not like cut, 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 cut. It's like cut, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, cut, and if I can count like 3 or 4 seconds, my eye can focus for that long. It makes it a much more enjoyable experience. Nowadays it's just like a constant like cut, 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 and you can't count 1,000 and 2, 1,000. You can't. You start 1 and boom, the next shot happens. So if we can get more of that, like tighter run times, more action scenes happening on a greater level, and we're getting fight scenes that are more stuff happening to them. And again, that's why I'm kind of going back to Michael Jai White, because he's someone who, as a practitioner of martial arts, is someone who could carry these kinds of things off better, right? That he's someone who could do 3 or 4 moves and have it all look nice, where you don't have to keep cutting it constantly. It's kind of where I'd like to see this thing go, where I know it's not going to go. And then so then it's more like, okay, I've got Bloodfist V Human Target. For whatever reason, it's not on the streaming sites. It's on YouTube. But it exists, right, for me to go back and watch it. And so I guess in that sense, we've got this time, and maybe we will never have this time again, right? That this time that existed, 30 years ago, it's done now. And so I come back to Bloodfist V, which, again, Bloodfist V Human Target is not the greatest in these movie series. It's good. It's a fun time. But it just delivers in this way that we just don't get consistently anymore, which is kind of a shame. So that's kind of mostly the one last thing I wanted to touch on is Yuji Okamoto. I don't know why this is, and I guess this sort of happens. I was talking with Ty and Brett about this, that like sometimes you just get these sort of songs in your head about people, or you get things kind of pop into your head that kind of either musically or just from a language standpoint, that just sort of stick with you when you hear somebody's name. For whatever reason, with Yuji Okamoto, I always get Rock Me Amadeus in my head, just set to his name. Like Yuji Okamoto, 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 Yuji Okamoto, and it just sort of every time. And so whenever he pops up on the screen, I'm like Yuji Okamoto. I don't know why that is. And of course, Yuji Okamoto, he was a major Albert Pyun mainstay. I don't remember how many tags he's got on our site just because of that fact alone being a Pyun mainstay. But he's up there, with tags. I mean, he's got to be close to 20, I think, or maybe 15, something like that. So let's see, 13 tags for Yuji Okamoto. So he's close to 15. And of course, we haven't seen him in a long time. But I don't know, for whatever reason, that's one of those ones where just, I get Rock Me Amadeus set, or Yuki Okamoto set to Rock Me Amadeus in my head every time I see his name pop up. So, okay, that's kind of everything there for Bloodfist V. So what we're going to do is take a break and come back, and we'll talk about Bloodfist VI, Ground Zero. My newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available now. It follows Don Veazey, who after 20 years has finally made it as a writer, going from an AP English teacher to richer and more famous than he ever could have imagined. In the process, his wife Lois, feeling alienated and resentful of her husband's success, has filed for divorce, forcing Don to move to a house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. With time alone to reflect, he's able to see how his new wealth and fame has affected his life in ways he never expected. Maybe the biggest of these is his new house, which is bigger and nicer than anything he's ever had in his entire life, but the longer he lives there, the more he gets the sense that it might have magical powers. But that can't be right. A house can't have magical powers, can it? Pick up Don's House in the Mountains today. You can find it at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle. It's the early 90s in LA. The war on drugs is raging, and Detective John Bainbridge is the LAPD's secret weapon against crime. Former Special Forces in Nam, he's a cop on the edge. When he and his partner Geary uncover a potential human trafficking ring, it doesn't take long before John Bainbridge realizes this thing goes all the way to the top, which doesn't scare him. That just means they'll fall that much harder when he takes them down. Part send-up and part love letter to early 90s action films, Bainbridge will take you back to the golden days of Canon, PM Entertainment, and AIP. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited from Amazon. Follow the link in the podcast description. All right, we are back, and we are looking at Bloodfist VI, Ground Zero. So I think, all the stuff that I was talking about with the previous one about how, movie 4 kind of sets the stage for this paradigm of sort of the Wilson against the world kind of thing. This one is a straight up Die Hard. Oh, I don't want to say straight up Die Hard ripoff, but it's definitely Die Hard-ish. I think I called it Die Hard more, but it definitely is Die Hard-ish. So the way the story works is we're in a nuclear launch or nuclear missile silo. It's run by a Navy officer. I think they're a Navy officer. I can't tell if they're Navy or Army officer. They look like Navy officers, but anyway, we've got Steve Garvey there. He starts in the film having sex with Katya Sassoon. But also we get Michael McDonald back. He is Michael McDonald is back as one of the Navy guys. He swears a lot more than he had in any of the other ones. But anyway, what's happening is that some baddie terrorists are taking over this silo so they can get access to the nuclear missiles. At the same time, Don the Dragon Wilson is supposed to bring in something top secret to Garvey, to Steve Garvey, who, again, Steve Garvey, if you're not sure, he used to play for the Los Angeles Dodgers. So Steve Garvey is a major on this base, and Wilson has something for him that is for his eyes only, but he gets delayed because as he's driving there, he hits a bunny rabbit and has to patch up the bunny rabbit. Why did he hit that bunny rabbit? Because Art Camacho and another member of this terrorist organization, they had a whole pen of bunnies that they were using to set off the sensor, so that then when they went through the system, the sensor, people looking at the sensor would say, oh, it's just these bunny rabbits. It's not Art Camacho and his buddy who are coming in to take over our base. So there's one of these bunnies sort of just strays onto the road, and Wilson hits it, injures his leg, so he has to patch up the leg. He gets there late. So when these baddies are sweeping through the base and taking it over, pretty much killing everybody but Garvey, Wilson's not there to be killed, right? So now he can then be the fly in the ointment. The problem is, of course, all this takes about a half hour to get to, so we're a bit delayed with that opening. But anyway, once he's there as the fly in the ointment, we find out from the higher-ups that are away from the scene who are trying to figure out what to do, that he actually was former special forces, that he was in the process of being court-martialed for not following an order. So they gave him this courier job, and now he's there. He's our only hope, right, to stop these baddies from launching these missile codes. There's a little bit of a MacGuffin element where he gets he has a key, essentially. Garvey has one of the launch keys. He sneaks the key to Wilson, who then has it on him. Once the baddies get the key, they've got to then, of course, use some way to get launch codes. Marcus Aurelius is in this as well. He's one of the baddies. He's the computer version of the baddie. He's essentially the Clarence Gilliard, quarterback is toast baddie, who can use computers. And so he's trying to decode the launch codes, while at the same time they've got the keys. And then once they have the access to it, the baddie played by Jonathan Fuller, plays a baddie named Fox. He is going to launch the missile and maybe potentially start World War III. So yeah, again, essentially Wilson is our only hope to save us from this. So yeah, so again, just talking about this paradigm that I just talked about, the Wilson against the world paradigm, this movie shifts away from that. He is, yes, one man against all odds, but he's definitely more the die-hard scenario, fly in the ointment person. And then what's interesting, right, is we get Robin Curtis, who you may remember, she played, why can't I think of her name? So she's in Star Trek 3, right? But she's playing the role of, I'm so horrible that I can't think of, the woman from Cheers who passed away recently, who played Rebecca on Cheers. I can remember her character name on Cheers, but I can't remember her. I'm so drawing a blank on her name here. And everybody's probably listening, going saying what the name is as I'm doing this. I don't really know where this comes from when you're older and you just, maybe it's maybe not even an age thing. It might just be just who I am, that I just have trouble with names. But yeah, that's just part of it. So Kirstie Alley, for whatever reason, I could not think of the name Kirstie Alley at all. I don't know why that was, but anyway, Robin Curtis plays Kirstie Alley's character in Star Trek 3. So remember in Star Trek 2, Kirstie Alley, right? She's in that movie there. And then for whatever reason, they couldn't get her for Star Trek 3. So Robin Curtis played that part in Star Trek 3. She is essentially the Reginald Vell Johnson character, but also a combination of the Reginald Vell Johnson character and the Gillian McWhirter, Amanda Weiss, Denise Duff, woman helping Don the Dragon Wilson against the odds kind of character as well. They don't really meet until the very end, but there is a sense that there might be some sexual tension when they do meet finally. But yeah, so they kind of go away from some of those elements of these movies with this film here, some of the things that they do. In terms of a Die Hard ripoff, again, this is weird as a Die Hard ripoff because, one, it takes us about a half hour to even get to Wilson as the fly in the ointment. And then even when he is the fly in the ointment, he gets caught a couple times. I think maybe even more than once. Maybe it's just the one time he gets caught. But anyway, he gets caught. He has to escape again, and he's got to do some of that kind of stuff there, which is weird, right? Usually the fly in the ointment doesn't get caught. They usually just are there the whole time and causing fly in the ointment problems for the baddie, right? And the baddie's like, just kill this guy, get him out. I've got 5 men. You can't kill this one guy. All that kind of stuff. Anyway, but he is, he's doing fly in the ointment kind of stuff. We get Katia Sassoon, if you remember her from Bloodfist IV. Bloodfist IV. She's back here. We think she is Garvey's lover. She's not Garvey's lover. As we talked about when John and I were talking about Bloodfist IV in the previous episode, I mentioned, right, when Don the Dragon Wilson in Bloodfist IV comes home and sees that she's the babysitter, right, you don't trust Katia Sassoon when she's the babysitter. You also don't trust her when she's telling you that she's your lover, right? Especially if you're Steve Garvey, right? You're not. Yes, you might be a baseball player in real life, but in the movie, you're not a baseball player. You're lucky, Katia Sassoon, you should be suspicious if she wants to be your lover. And it turned out, he should have been suspicious. And of course, we found out too. I think I found this out that this was her last film. So she ends up dying tragically in the early 2000s. So this was the last role that she did, unfortunately. But I mean, she's great as that sort of femme fatale baddie in this. And so she does. Really, really good stuff there. And so I liked her character here. So yeah, that definitely was a lot of fun. I probably should get into the Wilson aspect of this. I think, again, we still have Art Camacho here as our fight coordinator, and so you still get that quality. But I think between the confined spaces that we're working in, and then just sort of some of the names that that he's fighting against, you don't get quite the level of stuff that you had in 4 and 5. So definitely not 4. Like, this is definitely not the level of 4, but also not quite 5. Some of the fight scenes are a little bit clunkier. It's still good Wilson, right? It's still good Wilson stuff. Art Camacho still does a really great job as the fight coordinator. It's not the level of those other 2 movies. It's not quite. It doesn't match what those 2 give us. So, that's another piece of this, unfortunately. But Wilson is still, he's still, if he's going to be the fly in the ointment, it's kind of fun. In terms of Wilson fly in the ointment roles, right? There's the other one was Terminal Rush that he does with. Why can't I keep drawing blanks on names here? Right, it's not good here. He does with Roddy Piper, right? Terminal Rush, which was a lot of fun. And so that one I think is a better version of the better Die Hard movie that Wilson's in. This one, it's almost like they had to get it out of the way when they were going through the series of movies, right? That you've got like the down on his luck guy, you've got the amnesia guy. Now you got to have the Die Hard guy, right? Like, it's almost like they were just sort of checking off boxes along the way. But yeah, I was trying to think, when did Terminal Rush come out? So Terminal Rush was 96, so 2 years later he does that one. So again, he is just so busy doing stuff. And actually, 96 is also when the last of his Bloodfist movies, Bloodfist VIII, comes out as well. So kind of a eight movies in 7 years he does. So he's really, 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 really getting after it there, which is always really great. So I think Terminal Rush, in terms of his Die Hard movies, that one's a little bit better than this one. It's a step down. I think I was harder on it when I reviewed it. Again, it definitely benefits from that the fact that modern DTV films just aren't as good. For a movie like this to come out in 1994, I can imagine what this movie would be like if it came out today. It would just be such a slog, right? There'd be so much padding and so much other crap going on in it that, like, I'd probably I'd probably have trouble making it. It definitely wouldn't be. This movie was 86 minutes, right? It wouldn't be 86 minutes. It would be like 106 minutes probably, and it would have so much crap going on. And I guess the fight scenes would just be all chopped together, and you would know what's going on. It would probably have that kind of washed out look to it. Again, this movie, the fact that it was made in 1994 helps it, right? It kind of gives it a little bit more that somebody watching it today can latch onto. But again, I think you could make this movie with Michael Jai White. I think there's some things that I would do to probably tighten it up if I did it with Michael Jai White today in 2023 or 2024, 30 years later. I think I would get to that fly in the ointment piece sooner. I would, definitely the fight scenes. I think I think you could just kind of keep those where they are. But I think Michael Jai White is similar to Wilson. He's a next level fighter, so maybe do some more stuff with him in that part. Of course, the computer stuff would have to be more computery unless you had it take place in the 90s. The computer graphics in this are just so fantastic, right? They look like you're in your computer lab doing Oregon Trail or whatever. In middle school or whatever it was for me. I don't remember when I did Oregon Trail. I guess that would have been earlier than middle school. That would have been like elementary school, maybe middle school. I can't remember what I did. What games we played then. But that was the thing, right? You go to the computer lab and you'd play games. I remember there was one that was like a lemonade stand game where it was like essentially you would choose like the prices and you would buy the materials with the money that you would make. So it was like you had to set the right price to sell the maximum amount so you could buy more stuff. It was like this whole thing. I think it was that and like tomatoes. You'd sell tomatoes. That was another thing. But old computer game. They were showing us how to use computers. So the one thing I always say, kind of getting off on a tangent here a little bit about Oregon Trail. So I don't know how many people listening outside the United States did Oregon Trail. It's one of those things that was kind of a hallmark for a certain generation here in the U.S. And what's interesting is that my sort of age cohort born in 1979, people that are like slightly a year or two older, a year or two younger, they like to call us the Oregon Trail generation, kind of leaving out the fact that people that were older than us also did Oregon Trail. But the way Oregon Trail worked is that it was this old computer game in the 80s where you and your family would try to make it to Oregon from wherever, right? And you'd have the wagon. You'd have to take the wagon with you, and you'd have your wagon ford the river, and you'd have to navigate all these issues that would happen, and essentially your whole family would die off as you're going across. Somebody would die of dysentery. I don't remember if anybody was attacked by animals, but it was essentially, somebody would die fording the river, they would drown. So what we did as kids is we would name all of our family members again, after our classmates, so that when they would die, you'd point at them and be like, you just died of dysentery, and be like, oh yeah, you died fording the river, And I think what that was for us and our age group, that was really important when it came to getting into the computer age, is that before computers, right, everything was very much more regimented, right? You needed to know how to do something, follow directions, and do exactly the way the teacher told you to do it, or exactly the way your boss tells you to do it, right? Like if you're working in a factory, you got to do it exactly the way your boss tells you to do it, so make sure you get everything done the right way. Or if you're working, like my dad, he was a brick mason, right? You got to keep doing things exactly the way you're supposed to. You got to follow the directions and do it exactly that way. With computers, though, you need to learn to be able to think outside the box to be able to get ahead in a computer world, right? Like if I'm only thinking exactly how I use a certain program the way it's the way I've been told to use it, and I don't think about innovating and using it in different ways, I fall behind my colleagues, right? Because the colleague that can first figure out how to use a computer program in a different way and innovate with it is the one who gets the promotion. And I think the Oregon Trail thing kind of taught us that, right, at a young age. We figured out winning in a different way, right? Our teachers were telling us, no, you've got to get your family across the river, right? That's the goal of Oregon Trails. Not across the river, get your family to Oregon, right? And have as many of them survive. That's winning the game. And for us, winning the game became not getting the family across the river, but rather naming the characters or naming our family after classmates and having them die off in horrible ways and being able to laugh at our classmates that way. That was what winning was. We were already starting to understand computers in a different way from what our teachers, who were, boomers, silent generation, whatever, in some cases, they were even World War II generation. They were that much older, who didn't grow up with computers or understood computers as the things that made mistakes on TV shows. They were like, no, you need to, do this the right way. You need to get your, whatever the game is telling you're supposed to do, that's what you've got to do. And the fact that we were already seeing video games in a different way and understanding them as winning is something different than what the game tells you to do, I think that was already setting us up to understand computers in the way that we were able to adapt to being able to use them throughout our lives. And I know they always talk about that with Gen X, which I guess, according to Wikipedia, I would be considered Gen X, born in 79, but I don't really think of myself as Gen X just because I wasn't old enough to see any Star Wars movies in the theater. I barely remember Part 4 being in the theater when I was like 4 years old, or not Part 4, Part 3 when I was 4. It wasn't old enough to vote for Clinton here in the United States, which I think is a big piece of being Gen X, is that you were at least able to vote for him in one of the two elections. I couldn't vote until 2000 because I was born, I turned 18 in 1997, so I wasn't able to vote in 96. And I think that was a big piece for Gen X, is that, helping get him into office. So there's a lot of those kind of hallmarks there. I was in 6th grade when Nirvana's Nevermind came out, whereas like somebody born in 1970, right, they were in college for Nevermind. So I don't always think of myself as Gen X, but I think one of the hallmarks of that generation is that they remember the analog time, but also know how to use computers properly in ways that older generations aren't able to do. And I think that Oregon Trail thing is kind of where that starts, right? Those are the things where that kind of starts, where we're doing things. I mean, I remember when I was doing Q Basic as a senior in high school, and the teacher would have us all put like Q Basic at the top. Like you when you write the program, right, you could have text up there. One of the first things I did was instead of Q Basic, I wrote Q Butt Cheeks, right? And of course my friends and I, we thought that was hilarious. Q Butt Cheeks, But like we were already learning to innovate, right? Not just follow the instructions, write Q Basic at the top of the screen. No, I'm going to make it say Q Butt Cheeks instead, right? Like that's so it's like kind of all that stuff, but it sets us up so that when computers became everything, right? When everything was computer, was moved to computers, we knew how to figure things out. Why is this not working? Okay, I can innovate. So anyway, all that to say, kind of a big roundabout conversation there. But with the computer technology that we have in Ground Zero, one of the interesting things is that Don the Dragon Wilson, who is, I guess you could say, he's a boomer, right? He was born in the mid-50s. Again, the way that they track these generations, right? He could be what they call Generation Jones, which is supposed to be between boomers and Gen X. They have all these different things for that. But anyway, he was earlier than the computer age, right? And so he is having trouble following the instructions they're giving him to be able to use the computer to fix, to stop the missile from launching. So he just grabs the Uzi and just just hoses all the computer stuff down with his Uzi fire, and that's what stops the missile. So it could be like a metaphor for sort of where computers are now, right? But that Don the Dragon Wilson didn't grow up in the computer age, right? He kind of learned them when he was older. He was trying to still get his family across the river in Oregon Trail or whatever, however you want to do it. But he shoots everything down. But the computer thing for me, I always say this about action movies, that computers are one of the few magic elements in an action movie that we allow to be magic, right? So, and I can name a few different ones. Ninjas, right? Ninjas can be magic in action movies, right? A ninja can, make some dust and fly in front of him. Take an Alka-Seltzer tab and crush it up and throw it in the ground, and the powder escape in that powder, right? A ninja can catch an arrow in his teeth or whatever. So ninjas can be magic, right? And in an action movie, we allow for that. One of the ones I was talking about with Ty and Brett when I was on recently, we were talking about Keaton's Cop, which is a future episode that they're going to be having coming out. So keep an eye out. If you're not already subscribed to Comeuppance Reviews podcast, you should be. But keep an eye out for that. I think it might be their 100th episode. We talked about Keaton's Cop. But I mentioned another magic element, right? And that is when the guy who can't take care of himself, right? The hero who has a messy apartment. He spends the night with the leading lady, and within the hour or two that she's up before him, she magically transforms his house into from this cluttered, messy, degenerate outpost to this beautiful, nice, orderly, clean space that you can have guests over with. So there's that other piece of magic. But a third one, of course, is the computer, right? And I always say computers can do anything we want them to do until they can't, right? There's always sort of these rules with computers about like what they can and can't do that are just completely arbitrary within the movie to create some kind of, create some kind of tension. And this movie definitely has that. One of the best pieces, right, is that Marcus Aurelius, as our Clarence Gilliard quarterback as toast guy, he's got a computer program that essentially is able to decode the launch sequences. And what it is like it can pick out like one one number at a time. So it's like a 9-number code, and each number is like 0 through 9, and it picks one at a time, which makes zero sense, right? Because it should be able to get one of the 9 pretty quickly, right? Because it should just be able to be like, okay, it's only one of these 9, so boom. Really what it should be doing is it should be going through every different sequence of the 9 different codes, right? That's really what it should be doing. But no, it's just picking one number at a time, and it's sort of like this countdown thing of like, okay, we're 4 numbers away now. Oh, it's 3 numbers away now. Oh, we're so close. Makes zero sense. But again, computers are magic, right? And they can do what we need them to do until they can't. There's a period in the film where, okay, so the baddie played by Fox, he's got the 2 keys, right? Because he got the second key off of Wilson. Marcus Aurelius has made the launch code. He's decoded the launch codes with his program. So now they have the launch codes as well. And so the baddie sets the launch he sets the missile to launch. I think he's targeting New York City. As it's starting to go and launch, Don the Dragon Wilson is able to do something in a computer control room that essentially reboots the computer, and it gives him 3 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever amount of minutes to delay the launch while it's rebooting the computer. Now, not really sure what happens there. It's talking about how it's got to re-download, it's got to resave, it's got to back up or something. Whatever it does because it's a computer. And so, yeah, that's essentially what you've got going on here. Computers are magic, and they can do whatever we need them to do until they can't. And that's part of the thing is that while he can delay the launch from that computer room, he can't stop the launch from that computer room. He's got to actually get to the control room, right? So that way we have our baddie fight scene, and if he doesn't get to the control, then he won't be able to change the launch. It's kind of like, what is it? Fast and Furious 7, right? Where they can use a cell phone to block some kind of signal, but they have to be near a cell tower to have to do it. For whatever reason, right? They can't, so like all the whole like random typing and stuff, it only works in a certain way. Again, that's how computers are, right? They just make up these arbitrary rules about why computers can do some things but can't do other things, or you have to be in this place to do this and you can't be there or whatever. That's what this movie does. It does a lot of that kind of stuff. And finally, they just decide, the hell with it. Just have Wilson, shoot up the computer, the control panels, and that'll stop the missile from launching. And it worked. It worked well enough. But you have that there. So I kind of went on a big rant there about computers in movies and all that kind of stuff. But definitely what you had there. I was trying to think of some of the other stuff in this film, especially after going on that huge rant about that and forgetting some of the things I want to talk about. So the Steve Garvey aspect, right? So I'm a little young. I don't really remember. I'm not a little young. I'm 44, but I'm a little young to remember Steve Garvey playing. I think he retired before I watched baseball. So I know he was, he played in the 80s. So he started in 69. Wow. So I don't remember what his last year was. But I kind of just, he tried to have an acting career after. And so he played, so it looks like, I remember he was, I'm trying to remember the stuff that I would see him in. But, actually he did play into the 80s. So there was a part of me that thinks I remember having one of his baseball cards, but I don't know. So of course he was a part of the 81 Dodgers championship, which, most fans, especially National League fans, will tell you that's, one of the jokes about the Dodgers, right, is that they've won 3 titles since 81, but 2 of them were in like either the COVID shortened year or strike shortened year. So really it was only that 88 one. That's, I don't want to, I'm not going to say that, if we've got any Dodgers fans listening, hey, you got your 3 championships. It's always exciting. Okay, just looking up Steve Garvey a little bit here. I forgot. That's right. He played for the Padres at the end of his career. So that would have been when I would have had a baseball card of his. Would have been in those later 80s period. Like 87. If anybody else collected baseball cards in 87, that was Topps when they had the wood grain border. Really great year. I remember getting the Jose Canseco that year. It was like one of the coolest things ever. When I got that card, actually, I think it was one of my friends. My dad would give me a box of cards and like a box of packs, and my friends would come over and we'd open them. And a friend who wasn't really into baseball opened his pack. He really just wanted the gum, which wasn't that great anyway. But I was like, "Oh, it's Jose Canseco. Can I have that?" And he's like, "Yeah, I don't care. Whatever, you can have that." So it's kind of crazy to think that there was a time when Jose Canseco was like, you think of like the big players now, like Shohei Ohtani, I guess, or actually thinking of just like big athletes now, right? You think of like maybe like Mahomes, with Kansas City, or like LeBron James, right? Probably names like that, like these big sports athletes. Canseco was up at that level at that time in the late 80s. But anyway, the point I wanted to get to with Steve Garvey that I kind of got off on a baseball tangent about was show I used to watch that I love called Cheap Seats with the Sklar brothers. That was on ESPN Classic. And so ESPN used to have a channel called ESPN Classic. I guess they still have it. The way it works with these ESPN channels is that they essentially the local cable channels here in the United States, they really want the live sports that ESPN offers. So they pay a really high amount to Disney to be able to have ESPN. And part of it is they have to pay to take on these other channels like ESPN Classic. And so for a time, I think they were trying to have programming on ESPN Classic before that. And one of the shows was Cheap Seats, where the Sklar brothers, they would go back into the archives of ESPN and ABC and watch old sporting events. I don't know if they did a Battle of the Network Stars. I think they might have. But, they would do like a cheerleading competition or, dog racing competition or stuff like that. And one of them was Steve Garvey was doing like the celebrity fishing thing or something like that. And it had had the sheriff from Murder, She Wrote. It had this what they called a rising, he was termed a rising comedian, Michael Floorwax. So he had he was this blonde guy with a mullet who just made kind of obnoxious jokes, but he's Michael Floorwax. And then there's this guy from Toshiba, Earl from Toshiba, who just happened to be with them, fishing with them. I don't know what the deal was. He was like maybe higher up corporate guy who like either paid to be on the trip, or they just, Steve Garvey knew Earl from Toshiba and had him on. So it's the most ridiculous thing, but they're watching it. It was one of my favorite episodes. So of course I always remember Steve Garvey from that one. One of my favorite lines was they had the sheriff from Murder, She Wrote is there, and he said something along the lines, he's like talking to the camera, he's like, "Mama didn't raise no fool, you see," and one of the Sklar brothers is like, "Mama didn't raise no celebrity either." So I was like, oh yeah, if you can find Cheap Seats, I think it's on YouTube, it is fantastic, because what happened was with ESPN Classic is they stopped making original programming because they realized they didn't have to, because essentially the cable companies were forced to take it if they wanted the live sports programming from ESPN. So they just would throw crap on ESPN Classic. They didn't really care anymore. But for a time, they were trying to build that channel and make it something. And that was when Cheap Seats was on. And so Steve Garvey was on there doing a celebrity fishing tournament, I think it was. And again, one of the celebrities was Earl from Toshiba, rising comedian Michael Floorwax, and the sheriff from Murder, She Wrote. So yeah, if you can find that one, that's definitely a hilarious one there. But anyway, Steve Garvey, just seeing him in this, and he has kind of a bigger role than you think. Like a lot of times when you have athletes in these movies, they don't have as big of a role, but he has a pretty big role here. So yeah, it was kind of a lot of fun to see him there. Another note is the baddie. His character name is Fox, Fawkes, and so what that reminds me of is when I was working for a State Department contractor. I was scanning visa documents, and there was a woman. There was some women working with me that were from the Dominican Republic, and one of them, she was like a host at one of the restaurants in Rye, New Hampshire, and anyway, I was near them at work, and they were kind of having an argument, and then they called me in to see if I could settle the argument. And the question was, is she saying this correctly? And what she said was, she was telling people as the host of this restaurant, she was saying, "Good evening, Fox." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, good evening, Fox." And I was like, "No, you can't be calling people that. That's not right, And it took a second for me to realize that she was trying to say folks, and Folks. And she didn't know how to pronounce it. She just had read it and was pronouncing it Fox. So when I saw that this character's name was Fox, Fawkes, just reminded me of that story. Good evening, Fox. So there's that there. I was trying to think if there's anything else on this one. I kind of went through my notes on it, but sometimes I'll have notes on these movies, and then I'll remember that I wanted to mention something else and completely forgot it. But I don't know that there's much else in here on this one. Again, I think it's one of those things where it's almost like they felt like they just had to get a Die Hard movie out. I also think, too, when you're looking at it from a time standpoint where they're like trying to pump these Bloodfist movies out, this was probably an easier one to pump out because it's a relatively limited space that it's in. It's got some desert locations. It's got there's probably a ready-made underground bunker location. The underground bunker location was probably, a submarine in another movie, right? It's probably just the same thing. It looked kind of submarine-ish, to be honest. So, it was probably just an easy one for them to pump out and make happen, and they just, probably just put that in there just to do it. And it kind of has that feel, right? It has that feel of something that was just pumped out. That's kind of it. Again, though, it's one of those ones that it has a 90s quality to it that's like a little bit higher quality than what we get from today's stuff that makes it a little bit nicer, makes it a little bit more fun. And this one is on Tubi. For whatever reason, 4 and 5 aren't on Tubi, but 6 is. So I think that is everything here. So I think we could probably wrap this up, especially with the big tangents that I went on about computers and Oregon Trail and generations and all of those kinds of things. So again, with these being me being solo on these, I do my own plugs. So of course, dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. That's the website. That's where you can find everything. It's got links to the podcast. If you're not already subscribed to the podcast, which you should be, subscribing to the podcast is the easiest way to know when the next episode comes out, especially now because I have been running into trouble with getting the social stuff up. almost given up on Instagram because I've just been failing at that one so much. But even Twitter and Facebook, sometimes I just don't get a chance. And I was doing really great for a while because I'd gotten a Canva account and I was using that one. I was using Canva for stuff, and I was doing really good about like kind of putting together like kind of little graphics for the episodes. Maybe I'll get back into doing that. But anyway. Yeah, so subscribing is the best way to know when the next episode is going to drop. Definitely you can find that on the site there as well. And then, of course, my novels. My most recent one is Don's House in the Mountains. You can get that one on Amazon or Kindle. All of my books are on Goodreads. I have a Goodreads author account now, so you can go on Goodreads if you use Goodreads. You can add me. You can follow me on Goodreads. Find out when my next publications will come out, but also see all of my books on there. If you want to read one of them and brag about it to your friends on your Goodreads feed that, hey, I read another book this year. Put another one towards my my count for what we're getting to the end of the year, right? So people start putting their Goodreads the New Year's resolution kind of thing for Goodreads, where you say I'm gonna read this many books this year, right? The reading challenge, I think they call it. I haven't done it in a few years, but you can do that and put my books on there as well. I think that's everything. Again, my author site is MatthewPoirierAuthor.com, so you can go there to kind of get all the information on my books as well. All right, so I think we will wrap it up here, but thank you everybody for listening, and we'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.